Hey everyone, Vidette Mayer here. I am in Northern California now. Typically, I'm in Austin, but we made an emergency trip to Northern California to help out some family that is in need. My mom and stepdad live here, and there was a little bit of an accident a couple weeks ago. So my family made our way out here in order to help them build this beautiful house back here and to keep the project running while my stepdad heals from a fall he took. One of the things I wanted to roll out with Mindset Alchemy and this tribe were interviews. I've done interviews years before, and what I really love is to hear people's experiences with whatever the topic is. So the topic for Mindset Alchemy really is to have an idea and to follow the idea. And the most beautiful things about our ideas is typically what originally comes is not really the idea that unfolds, but it just keeps getting better and better as we follow the journey of the idea. And that's what I love so much about the ideas and following them and saying yes to them, because you never know where they're going to end up, but they always end up even better than you could imagine. So I wanted to start a new series called Spotlight Interviews. It's what I called them years ago, and spotlight women in this tribe that are following their ideas. So that's what this is about. My first guest is Sarah Martin. She's a friend of mine, but also in just speaking with her and hanging out with her prior to COVID and all of that, I loved the idea of how her idea started with one thing and actually took her to where she is now. And it's leading her to work that she absolutely loves, but it wasn't like she set out and said, I'm going to become an embodiment coach. She didn't know what that was at the time she said yes to the idea. So I loved the story of her journey. I love the creativity that went into it, that sparked it, and I wanted you to hear her story. So I hope you enjoy this. If you have questions, please leave them in the comments as you watch our interview together, and allow her to answer some questions for you, and we'll see where this all goes. But thanks for being here. I do believe it will bring value to you and maybe give you the courage to say yes to some of the ideas that might just be floating around in that beautiful mind of yours. So enjoy. I look forward to hearing your feedback afterwards. Let's get started. Okay. All right. Hey everyone, it's Vidette Mayer here. I'm rolling out a new idea, and if I were to be totally honest, I have zero idea where it's going to go or what it's going to become. So I don't have a name, I don't have anything. But the idea behind doing these interviews is to bring on people that I meet along my own journey and ask them how they are creating ideas that come to them. So one of my first people that I really wanted to bring on was my guest here, my friend, Sarah Martin. And Sarah was talking to me about this new venture that she's on, and she is in the final process of becoming an embodiment coach. And why I wanted to have her on here first is I think there's a couple things happening here. The word embodiment, what I've noticed in my own life journey is we all have these words that we have an identification with, or a contextual definition of. And I use the word embodiment all the time, of embodying new ideas. And when you embody it, then you fully live it and experience it. However, I had never heard of the embodiment coach context. And in being friends with Sarah and having her tell me about the process, I was quite fascinated with it. And I was also quite fascinated with how the idea of becoming an embodiment coach for her unfolded, because the idea really wasn't at all, I'm going to become an embodiment coach. And how it came to fruition was right up my alley, with the idea of creativity in there as well. So Sarah, thank you for being here. Thanks for rolling with me on this idea that I don't know what it is, but we're just going with it. So tell me a little bit about yourself and maybe how the idea sparked for you to become an embodiment coach. So just go into your journey a little bit with this whole idea.
All right. Well, I'm really happy to be here, Vidette. I'm so appreciative of the unknown path, and that you trust me to bring me into the unknown path, because I'm super excited to figure it out with you. So, yeah. So I'm Sarah. I have a coaching and facilitation practice called Home Body Creative. And my path to embodiment was, as you indicated, very circuitous. It was not linear. I didn't even know what I was doing. And diving into it, it was more a curiosity than it was anything else. And it was a curiosity based in a need to solve a problem.
Mm-hmm. And that problem being what?
The problem was that I felt like a wreck in my body. Mm-hmm. Working remotely for a company based in New Jersey. So I was in Texas, they were in New Jersey. And I was at a computer all day. And it was the first time in my career that I had ever done that. I used to be a scenic designer for theater and a professor. So I was running around a theater and a shop and building things and using my whole body all the time. And, you know, even though I was teaching design, theater is a very active profession. So you're always moving, you're always just using your whole body to do everything. So I had switched jobs for various reasons. I was excited about switching jobs. I was excited for this new opportunity, and I really enjoyed the work. I was project managing for a theater consulting firm that designs theater buildings. So I have a background in architecture and just translated my 15, 20 years of experience into helping architects design buildings for the performing arts. And I noticed after about a year of working at this firm that I was really stiff because literally all I was at a computer and standing desk, sitting desk. I had all the ergonomic things I was supposed to have, but my body didn't feel good. I was stiff. I was achy. I was sort of like hunched. I was working real hard to figure out how to use my body in this position. But what I noticed was that it started to affect my emotional health. That not only did I feel bad in my body, but I started to get increasingly angsty. So I was anxious or angry, or my fuse was very short. And somebody thankfully introduced me to yoga at this point. And I know that means I'm like the latest person to get introduced to yoga. I can't believe I didn't discover it prior to this point. But when I started to do yoga, I realized that part of the problem was the stillness. And I started to feel so much better, and naturally, out of curiosity, started looking into, like, what is this thing? What is this thing that I'm experiencing?
One question. You used the word stillness, but I think it was in the context of like the unhealthy stillness of not moving, because we always hear, find the stillness, and it's not the emotional stillness. It was
good distinction to make.
Physical stillness of not moving.
I'm going to replace the stillness with stagnant.
Oh, God, yes.
Or maybe inertia, like physical inertia leading to energetic and emotional inertia.
Yes, yeah. Because everything is combined, not combined, but everything is integrated. When one is, that's right. When I talk about the three minds, when it's integrated, we flow. But when they're operating separately, everything kind of comes to a sticky standstill, and you try to make things work. And that's what you were finding in the physical form, that when your physical body was stagnant, it then led the emotional self to go stagnant as well and dip down. So it's,
you got it.
Yeah, quite. So how, does that lead into the embodiment then of?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I kind of hijacked it there, but I wanted to make sure that we understood the word stillness there was not like the one we had
not the good
aspire
stillness.
to. Yeah.
Right.
The contextual difference, right? Like that's
totally.
I'm fascinated with sometimes just with this the context of words. If somebody uses a word that I think I know in conversation, sometimes I'll be like, what does that mean to you? It's not like a life coaching thing. It's to make sure that we're having an integrated conversation. So anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I started doing research to try and figure out like what is happening here.
Mm-hmm.
It was surprising and new information, and I came upon the word embodiment.
Mm-hmm.
I think this was 2018, and I had just learned about the Embodiment Conference, which is this giant international online conference that you can attend for free. It's still happening, um, and it's led by a guy named Mark Walsh, who is based in the UK. And again, kept doing research, kept doing research. Mark Walsh invented a thing, an embodiment modality called embodied yoga principles.
Ah.
And they just happened to be doing a training, and the only US training was in Austin, Texas,
Which is where we are.
which is where we are.
Oh my God.
So,
Okay,
of course,
pause for 1 second. I have to point out that the part of, I mean, this is, maybe it is a plug, maybe it's not, but part of my program is all about once you decide on something, that decision is kind of encoded vibrationally with the guidance that leads you to the thing, to the manifestation of the idea. So I think
totally.
I want to point that out in this moment of our conversation, because what are the chances of that? People might be like, oh, well, that was just her. But that's how it works. That's how synchronicities work. When we say yes to an idea, we have no idea where we're going. You just started researching, and look what the one and only event here in the US is in Austin, your hometown. That's how this stuff works. And I have the chills all the way down. I didn't
Me
know that part
too.
of your story. And just to be clear for everybody watching, eventually all the masses that are going to watch us, this really isn't I didn't know. I asked Sarah not to tell me the entire story prior to this because I wanted this to be the first time. So this is not queued up and, scripted.
Packaged.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, lady. Keep going. So
No, I
the
appreciate it.
conference is
And
here in Austin.
it is. And I appreciate that you bring up the synchronicity piece, because that occurred to me when I was looking at it. I was like, oh, EYP, he's based in Brighton, UK. Gosh, I could never afford to do that. Or, like,
Yes.
my initial thought was, oh, darn it, this is super inaccessible to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then scroll down a little bit more, and I'm like, you got to be freaking kidding me.
Yeah.
Only US training is in Austin. Well, that means I got to do it. So,
And that also negates the when people say, I don't have enough money to do that.
right,
Like stuff like this happens all the time.
right. And
You
it's
didn't
not,
have to pay for it.
yeah. And it's not like the training was free. It was still
Right.
a stretch. But once I eliminated the travel piece, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, this
I
is
can do that.
I'm going to make happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I did this embodied yoga principles teacher training, and it's intended for people that are already yoga teachers, and I'm not a yoga teacher. And it's intended to help bring yoga off the mat and into your life. So essentially, embodied yoga principles is this. It's a very immediate embodiment practice that helps you not only better understand your embodied states, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but it also helps cultivate aspects of your embodiment that feel foreign, or that that you want to develop in yourself, that'll help you be different, better, have greater range in your life.
Okay.
So again, at this point, I was not a coach. At this point, I was not a yoga teacher, nothing. But I knew I needed to take this embodiment training. And I reached out to Mark and basically said, hey, I don't have a traditional background, but here's my story. And, I had already started thinking, like, if I feel this bad in my job, and I have only been doing it for 2 years or so, imagine how people that have been at a desk for 15, 20 years feel.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, how awful mentally they might feel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to paint with too broad a brush here. Not everybody that sits at a desk feels as terrible as I did, right? I know plenty of people that can work at a computer all day and feel just fine, but that was not my experience.
No, mine either.
I started to connect to what for me is universally the thing that gets me really jazzed, and it's the human experience, right? When I was a theater practitioner, that was why I was a theater practitioner, which was to tell human stories and to reflect the human experience and the condition, and make theater that helped people think about their humanity, right?
Wow.
That happened. So I started thinking about the humanity of embodiment and um, correlating it to, things that I would love to see healed in the world, difficult dialogue and discourse rooted in adversity. And yeah, and so this was sort of all percolating. Again, none of it was a cohesive idea.
Mm-hmm.
I should do this training.
Question.
Yeah.
With watching the event online, and between there and when you reached out to Mark was his name, right?
Yeah.
There was a lot, in what I see is there was a lot of opportunity for you to say, oh, I can't do this. I'm not a yoga instructor. I'm not this, I'm not that. And yet you kind of slip through, I'm wanting to make sure that this is pointed out. You kind of slip through that loophole of getting caught up and in your head of what you thought the program was for, who you thought it was for. And you just like, I feel it. And I love that you led with the feeling, because all of the evidence was there that it wouldn't have been a program for you to get into. But you were led by the feeling, the intuitive feeling, which again is a lot of part of what I teach in my own programs. So that's why I'm pointing it out, because this is all part of the process and the puzzle, so to speak. Although it doesn't have to be a puzzle, this is all part of the framework of stepping forward towards our ideas. They don't make sense.
Nope.
That program didn't make, bullet pointed sense, but you slipped through one of the bullet points based on feeling alone. So keep going. I love that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. It was not logical.
Right.
It was not logical.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really big leap, because I have lived my whole life, and people might disagree with this assessment of my life, but I have lived and made choices and tried to play things very safe at times in my life. Some choices that made sense, like what I should do, or the safe choice financially, or the safe choice, the linear progression of a career, right? Like, so yeah, this was a real leap for me. It was all intuitive. It was all instinctive. Like, I'm really curious about this and I need to follow my curiosity here.
I love that.
Yeah.
But I also think too that kind of sense kicks in, especially when I think all ideas are ours to create. I'm not sure what the proper terminology is, because I think all ideas are valid that come to us. Yet those that are really specific to our purpose here, that we tend to hear them a little bit differently. Hear them, in our here, or wherever you hear it. Everyone hears it differently from within, from that wild spirit, as I call it. And you just heard it with such consistent, or such volume, that there was that it was higher volume, so to speak, than all the reasons from your human mind why it wasn't the right thing. So I think to really pay attention to those ideas that just you're like, there's no question in it. You're like, I'm going to reach out to him. I'm going to do this program. I don't know why, but I would imagine, being a very logic oriented person in majority of your life, there were many times when the human brain is saying to you, no, that's not logical. And there may have been ideas that you didn't follow, but this one was just a little bit different. And those are the ones that we need to key into, especially. So
absolutely,
pointing that out as well.
Yeah. Well, and so you mentioned the volume that I heard it. It was like a resonance. I mean, it was like an idea that kept ping-ponging around in my body. And I was like, oh, and it kind of lit me up. It lit me up on. And it was the first thing in a very long time that made sense to me on a cellular level.
Whoa. Mm-hmm.
I say that literally and figuratively, right? Because I started diving into the world of embodiment, and I literally, cellularly, physiologically started to feel better, and emotionally started to feel better. But the figurative part is, um, it was it was such a new door opening onto a different kind of awareness and a different avenue of exploration of um, emotional health, emotional literacy,
Good word.
well-being, and because I was experiencing it firsthand and seeing so much benefit, experiencing so much benefit from it in conjunction with other practices like yoga practice, therapy. I mean, I'm not suggesting that embodiment is the answer, the truth, capital T.
Yeah.
It's a giant piece of the truth
Mm-hmm.
that we don't often embrace, or that we're not accustomed to tapping into for more information about how we are and who we are.
Mm-hmm. I love
Um,
that what you said about the truth, because I think there's billions of pathways to the truth, and we identify religions that, people will identify like this is how you get to the truth or the essence of who you are. Yoga is how you get, like, some people say yoga is how you get to the truth, but there's billions of different ways to get to the truth, and embodiment is one way. And when you have different rivers coming from different ways, it leads into a big pool of truth. So you're saying
yeah,
it's what I'm hearing is that it's embodiment. When I say is, embodiment is simply one, what's the tributary to the truth that feeds in, with yoga and with therapy and, with a spiritual practice if you have one, and with, whatever it is. But we
yeah,
all have to welcome our way to get to the truth. And embodiment is one of those ways, how you lead people to the truth of who they are
yeah,
and to the essence. Because when you're not living your essence, you hurt
yeah,
physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally.
yeah. And it's all information, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of these tributaries give you
Yeah.
entry into um, different aspects of who you are, and it's all information. It's all grist for the mill. So yeah, that I love how you explain that this this truth is more of a pool. It's more of a container
Yeah.
of of information.
Yeah. Infinite. Is it, yeah, I would say, like, it's a container of infinite wisdom, and the tributaries are the information that then leads us into the wisdom, and maybe so this is where I would use the word embodiment, is when information leads into a truthful aha of wisdom. That's when I say we embody it. We embody that truth. So
Mm.
how does that relate to the word embodiment as you use it as a modality? Or is it the
Oh,
modality?
sure.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
how does
yeah.
your use of that word differ from how I just used it?
Gotcha. So embodiment, in the way that I'm using it, is basically regarding um, your embodiment is a subjective aspect of who you are.
Okay.
So an aspect of the self. Your body is more than a brain taxi, as Mark Walsh would say.
Mm-hmm.
And what he means when he says that, what I mean in this context, is our body reveals our emotional truth,
Yep.
and it
Like,
also generates our emotional truth.
mm-hmm.
So we often talk about I don't know, emotions like anxiety or anger. I know in my life, those have been emotions that I didn't know how to express, or, when I was a kid, it was like, you don't express those, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you don't know how to express or how to process emotional information, and it can be simple, like everyday emotional information, or it could be trauma, or um, it could be acute, or it could be low level stuff that happens over a long time, like what.
Mm-hmm.
But when we don't process that emotional information, it's still in us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We still in our body, in our embodied selves, and that's when you get to those places where it's like suddenly you're responding in a way that is disproportionate or doesn't match the actual situation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we have this, it creates a kind of residue, right? And over time, this residue inhabits us. We respond to the world through that lens, right? So initially, we're just trying to like keep control of the world around us. We're like, I don't have time to respond in anger. Like I'll just let it go, whatever. But we embody those things that we don't process, that we're aware of. I guess I should say that when we don't take the time to understand our emotional reality,
Mm-hmm.
we think of our emotions up here, but we experience our emotions in our whole body.
Yeah.
And we try and think ourselves out of our physiology all the time, right? How many times have you said, oh, don't worry about that. Don't be anxious about that. Stop yelling at whoever, right? If you have, maybe that's a thing. I don't have any kids, but like I remember growing up with my sister, stop yelling.
Yeah.
So when we just stop, when we're just stopping, we haven't processed the thing that's creating the emotion. So it lives in us and it comes out in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Similarly, if we think about this in terms of practice, we are what we practice. So if we practice anger in our bodies, or we practice anxiety, then we begin to generate more anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
It colors everything that we look at, right? The lens of anxiety becomes that through which we see everything else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is what embodiment is. Embodied awareness is about developing competencies so that whatever you're doing in your life, if you develop an awareness of how you are in your body as part of the conversation about how are you in the rest of your life, right? It can be physiological, it can be emotional, it can be all of these different tributaries of information. But including embodiment in that conversation allows you to also then say, how am I? How do I want to be? And change something about your embodied state,
Mm-hmm.
activate the thing you want to embody.
So, to give some practical information, because that's a really important point I feel like that you just made. Someone finds themselves in anxiety. We're especially now where we are in the world at this time. We're in the the lockdown thing, lockdown coronavirus thing. Someone feels anxiety. What do they do to become aware and to move into what they do want to create rather than sitting in the anxiety? What would you
Sure.
coach them to do?
Yeah. So everybody's anxiety manifests a little bit differently. Um, Maybe the first thing I would do is coach somebody to sort of really take in the embodied information they're getting. So a lot of times that involves like closing your eyes and just doing a body scan. Not revolutionary, but if you're not accustomed to identifying where you're holding tension, it can be really hard to do a body scan.
Yeah.
Right? So I'll take myself as an example. I know that I am really anxious when I am experiencing my shoulders raise and I hold tension from into my neck and I clench my jaw. And then I can even relax my jaw to a certain point and still be holding tension there.
Yeah.
So I would, when I feel anxious, I coach myself to really like take in where all the places in my body that I'm holding tension, and how can I always say, how can you find 10% more ease?
Nice. I like that.
Yeah, and a lot of it is about, um, you can do meditations. You can sort of use the breath as a vehicle for
Mhm.
getting energy, and a little bit of a caress to a
Mhm.
area that's holding particular tension. Um, you can use whatever metaphor is most useful,
Mhm. Mhm.
but it's intentionally relaxing those parts of the body, breathing into it. Finding your breath is a key part of embodiment. Being able to center yourself when you're experiencing an emotion that, like anxiety or anger, that tends to shorten the breath.
Mhm. Mhm.
Breath, it sort of hijacks your deeply embodied states.
Yeah.
So finding the breath, sending it to the parts of your body that are experiencing a great deal of tension, and then it's about asking um, asking questions that are going to tease out what this response is about.
Mhm.
So it's one thing to just basically tell your body, stop being anxious, stop being angry, send the breath,
Yeah.
but then there's a little bit more involved. It's like, what is going on that I am responding in this way? And sometimes you may find that you're sitting in tension in your body without any stimulus, right?
Mhm.
Right now, especially with COVID, I'm clenching my jaw. I'm like, there is a sort of baseline of anxiety that I'm experiencing for no specific reason.
Yeah.
So, asking questions like, where is this coming from? What is this in relation to? If it's because of an acute situation, um, you can ask yourself things like, um, how do I want to be? Right? And that's not necessarily like, well, I want to be relaxed and I just relaxed my body. But how do I want to be able to respond in that kind of situation? And if so, let's say that your boss yells at you, and all you do is you freeze up and you just take it, and the conversation stops, and you leave the office, and you're carrying around all of that stuff for the rest of the day. A really useful question might be, how would I like to be able to respond in that situation?
Yeah.
And you can name it whatever you want. Maybe it's grace, maybe it's openness, maybe it is, I don't know, what's another word that would be useful there?
Like empowered to have a
Yeah,
conversation about it
there you
if you
go.
feel like it's not warranted, rather than reacting, being like, well, you're just a jerk, boss. You could be like, thank you for that input,
Yeah,
and yet here's my thought process on it. Here's why I
right.
chose to do what I did. So you're having that empathetic communication,
Yeah,
and you're not reacting like he's such a jerk, or you walk out of there saying, he's the worst boss ever. It's like, how
right,
do I empower myself to have that conversation without it being a reactionary conversation?
right. And so you bring up a great point. It's not just about like empowering. An empowered conversation in that moment is not just about not feeling anxiety and anger,
Right. Yeah.
right? Dissipating those things is helpful, because
Hmm.
when you dissipate the anger and anxiety and call in, I'm going to say stability,
Hmm.
right? Stability, groundedness,
Hmm.
goodness, right? You can call in these different things, and I'll talk about what I mean by calling in, because it's not an esoteric
Yeah.
uh, sort of spiritual.
Calling in the angels kind of thing.
Yeah, it's
Which would come
it's
out of my,
grounded.
let's call in the angels, but like very
Although that can
practical.
be helpful.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong.
No, I hear
That maybe
you.
I
I
brought
hear
in
you.
the word grace, so it's
Yes.
not out of the realm of my consideration. But when you get rid of the anxiety, the question is, what's available to you
Yes.
from the body of anxiety versus the body of stability?
Yes.
Available to you. What kinds of conversations can you have? What kinds of relational moments can you have? How connective can you be from anxiety versus
Hmm.
other things? And what kind of stuff do you need to be in? How do you need to be in your body, in your embodied self, in order to have a difficult but empowered conversation?
Yes. Yes. Oh man, okay, there was a lot of juice in that last 10 minutes or so. And I think the first thing that I think you said that really I thought, is a good point to go back to is when you're in the like the anxiety, the question is how do I reduce this 10 or 15%? Like that I talk about that a lot. How do we move ourselves? If you think of like a ladder of emotions, I know I've talked to you about it. At the very lowest is shame, and at the highest is bliss and enlightenment. So if you're here at anxiety, how do I just go up one rung up? We're not asking people, it feels like to me, you're not asking people to go from I'm anxious to how do I become inspired and take care of this. Like we just have
enlightened.
to take off the edge where the reaction comes from, to give yourself a little bit of like, okay, I went from anger, now I'm at fear, because if I'm at anger, like fear is a little bit of a less, it's still not where I want to be all the time, but it still gets you to a point where you can be like, okay, I'm moving up the rung or the ladder, but now I'm at a place that I can at least have a conversation and not bite someone's head off, or that I can feel. So it's not disregarding that you have anxiety or that you're experiencing fear or that you're experiencing overwhelm or whatever the emotion is. We don't want to take away the fact that that's happening, because that's an indicator of something. So you're just saying reduce it enough so that you can then take a look and say, like, what is the indicator? How do I, in this grounded space, how do I don't want to say deal with it because that feels weird. How do I embody? No, we don't want to embody that. Help me with the word.
I'll offer this word.
Yeah.
How can I be most resourced in this moment?
That's the other thing too.
Respond.
Yes. And that I love that, because that 10 or 15% of, coming down opens up that much possibility of, like you said, resourcefulness of new ideas, new questions, words that can be used in that grounded space. That's great, lady. I think that's a gem of this interview, of giving someone permission to be okay being in the yuck, and just kind of diffusing it just enough to allow yourself the space to be able to hear that intuitive guidance of here's how we move through this. And by moving through it, it's processing it. Is that right?
Yes.
Or
it is. Now I was going to bring up two other pieces of this. Embodied states, if you're going to cultivate these new things in you, right? So that when you experience the anxiety, it becomes less and less of a focus project. It takes practice, right? It's not a one and done kind of situation where it's like, oh, I know that when I experience anxiety, I do this and I clench my jaw and all this stuff. If you want to shift how you respond and react more readily, to be able to, as I said, call in the things that are going to best support you in the moment, does take practice. And so I really want to encourage people, don't be seduced into thinking that one experience of embodied awareness means it's fixed.
It's done.
Because we live in this world where we really, really want to fix it so we don't have to deal with it anymore. And I encourage all of my clients to really look at this as a conversation with yourself. It is be ongoing, and it is something that is a lifetime conversation. Because your embodiment is always shifting. Our embodied states, they are a result of our historical context, our cultural context, our family context, our present tense, our lived experience. So at any moment, all of this stuff is coming to the mix. And having an awareness of it you better able to choose how you want to be rather than being at mercy of your reactions, right? So thinking about it in terms of practice, I think is the most realistic and practical.
Yeah.
Talking about practical use.
Well, and I like the idea of practice, or I like that word, and it kind of led me back to, you know, yogis who are in a practice. Their practice evolves. You know, your first year as a yoga student versus your 20th year is very different. The practices kind of looks the same, but it's very different. And I think that as well with, you know, emotional well-being or embodiment, it's like we have these, you know, our first, let's say, first year of really being in tuned and aware of our emotions and our reactions to things. It's like, you know, here we are, but then we evolve and step up a little bit, but so do our emotional reactions. Like they evolve too, just like a yogi will evolve, and then you go deeper into it.
Yeah.
So I always say, like, you know, if there's an emotion that we've lived with a lot, like anxiety, you know, like we can take a layer of that through our awareness out, but there's still the ball of it, you know, and then we evolve and we work on another layer, and it shrinks down in its, you know, in its power over us, but it's an evolutionary practice of working with it. Like, oh,
Absolutely.
hello, dear friend, here we are again.
Yeah.
You know, what is this about
absolutely.
this time? Because what brings us anxiety when we've never ever worked in a coaching or in an emotional level is very different from after we've worked with a coach or with someone or ourselves over a longer period of time.
Yeah.
So I said a lot of words there, but just
It all
everything
made sense.
evolves. Like, you know, it stops evolving when we die. So, you know,
Yeah.
we're always going to be a work in progress. No matter
Absolutely.
how enlightened, you know, one feels they are, there's
Yeah.
still going to be something that triggers something that we can say, oh, what is this about?
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to tie it back to, you know, this is where creativity comes in for me, right? Because the creative process is a process of not knowing. It is circuitous, it is nonlinear, it is often terrifying, often amazing and inspiring. It is this mix of all of these things.
Yeah.
And, you know, if we are creative enough, creative, capable, and whole, which I believe everybody is,
Me too.
we can ask questions of ourselves, of our embodiment. We can ask ourselves new things about how we are. We can sort of dive into these different avenues of knowing ourselves from different angles. And it doesn't have to be about existential terror or dread or not getting it right, or, you know, it doesn't have to carry all this weight, but we can just creatively and curiously move forward with new questions and maybe new practices.
I love that. I think that's I love the fact that we went there, and I think it's a good place to kind of wrap all of this up, because I like the creative, I always say the idea is the start, is kind of like the gun going off at the beginning of the creative process, and then the creative process is where the how of it unfolds, and the how unfolds by asking questions. What's next? You know, what does this have to do, like, what does this thing showing up in my life have to do with, you know, how do I grow from this, or how do I overcome it? How do I reduce it by 15 to, you know, whatever the question is, right. You know, it's asking the question that leads to the next how and the next step that kind of gets us to the end point. So thank you for bringing up the creative process, because that was the whole idea of you coming on here first, because we like bonded over creativity in different ways, and how creativity shows up for you, and how it's been a kind of like a journey for you and for me, but they've been different, but still it's all creativity. And I love the fact that that really was the spark that started this whole process for you. So as far as ideas, with where you are right now, what is the wildest idea at this point that you have for yourself?
I mean, can it be like a project?
However, yes. It's an idea.
I'm so excited. I had this idea about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. So when I was practicing theater, part of what got me super the bridge into embodiment from the theater perspective was a process called devised theater.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically squashing the vertical structure of a creative process that exists in theater and makes it totally horizontal so that all roles are equal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a designer by trade, but maybe I'm writing some text around on the floor, or I'm dancing or something, right?
Yeah.
Right?
There's a fly. It was like right here. It was like, I was trying to act all cool, but then I was like, okay, you're a little close. So
Sorry, I
sorry
blew
about
it.
that. Yeah, I think I love that, like taking this vertical thing and making it, that's really kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shoot.
So before the pandemic, and I think I talked to you about this,
Mm-hmm.
I was really curious to do devised processes with non-theater people.
Yeah.
I did this when I was teaching, and it was really wonderful for storytelling and getting real stories of people's lives out in the open so that people are sharing openly and
Yeah.
taking creative risk and helping them develop different competencies with risk overall in their lives, right? So it was a great playground for developing embodied competency. And I want to create, even though we are socially distanced and most of our work is happening on video, I would like to start a devised project based in this very strange time that we have, where people are telling stories of their experience of the pandemic. And I want to explore new ways of designing or developing theatrical work via digital means.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to over the next few weeks, I'll be launching, have a name in mind, but I'm not quite ready to throw it out there. But I want to launch this project and get it going, because I think time is of the essence, and to really capture what's happening right now and really understand and connect over the real experiences of a variety of people.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do it.
I love that. I love that time is of the essence, and it's that is representative of the times that we're in our world, but also in life. You know, like time is of the essence. You have an idea, and that's what I've been so attracted with you is like in our friendship is you have an idea. You're like, what I've noticed is you've gone with it, and I'm, you know, we've all been to at the point where we're like, I have an idea, but all the reasons, but what I have found in my sphere of influence, my circle of friends, is they're all risk takers. They get an idea and they're like, we're going after it. I don't even know where I'm going with it, but I'm going. And I love the idea that you've done this with your embodiment coaching, and you're doing it with this new vertical to linear, you know, process, theatrical process, which we've talked about, and it sounds fascinating to me, and I want to partake in that in whatever way it comes through. And that, you know, that this is where we do the creative process is in action as we speak, with everyone having to figure out, how do I bring my work into the digital world? We're all having to get creative and figure it out. So there's a lot going on here, lady, with embodiment, and like just paying attention. What's stopping me from doing this? Or what is, like, where am I right now? Why am I not feeling healthier? Or, you know, does it work? One last question quickly, but because I don't want it to be too long and then people won't watch. But if it's, does it work? Does embodiment work for the other side of the coin, when, you know, life is just flowing and there's a lot of happiness and joy? I've been kind of in that space for a little bit, and for me, it's a completely different level of awareness of, wait, I find myself looking for things to be worried about, which tells me how I've always operated. You know, there's always been, you know, something to be anxious about, something to work on, something to heal, something to fix. And now I'm kind of like, there's not a whole lot to fix. And that's a whole different, really weird space to be in too. And embodying, for me, the permission to just be in joy and inspiration is kind of hard too. It's a weird, very strange, the awareness of, oh, shit, I don't have anything to really be worried about.
Right on. You know, and you bring up a great point. Like, when you're happy, when there's nothing wrong, do we need to worry about our embodiment?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? I'm embodying happiness. All is well.
Yeah.
And that is true. And also, it's important to note, like, so what happens when a disruption to that happiness comes in, however big or small?
Yep.
Maybe it's your groceries didn't get delivered. What kind of body does that put you in? Like, how do you get into that?
Mm-hmm.
There isn't anything else to cultivate in this moment, right?
Yeah, in this moment. Mm-hmm.
Stage of happiness or transcendence or enthusiasm, right? But perhaps, let's say, a larger disruption happens. Somebody in your family falls ill. And it's then the transition from your embodied happiness to whatever is in the mix with your family member. That's quite a gulf, right?
Yep.
And so what comes in when this other thing presents itself? There's a lot of ways to I guess think about what cultivating embodied awareness means at different points in your day or your life, or where you are in your life, right? You're blissfully happy, and maybe you find that you have trouble having conversations related to business because it feels so transactional and it's so counter to this blissful, like, creative thing. I fall into this sometimes. Right? So what do I need to, it's not that I'm not happy, but what do I need that's going to help me have these business conversations more effectively? Maybe it's a disposition for ambition, right? Ambition in the best sense, right? So identifying what you need is part of it. And then finding the body, like, to cultivate the thing that will most effectively serve you in that moment and be available to you for all time, right? I think that's how the other side of the coin functions.
Yeah, I love that. So we're always in a state of embodied awareness, no matter where we are.
Well, aware or not.
Well, true.
Or
and
unconsciously.
We're always in the state. Yes.
We are always embodying something.
Yes.
You may not know it. You may know it, but if you don't know it, then you are not at choice with how you are being.
Yeah. Great point. That's a good point to end on, so that people can stop and question, am I in a state of embodied awareness? I love that, lady. Thank you so much. For anyone interested in learning more about Sarah and everything that she does, her link is in the description down below, so you can check her out and find her on social media as well. Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Vidette.
For being a part of this thing where I was like, girl, I don't know what this is, but well, like, can I just interview you? You're like, sure. So
I'll kick it off. Let's do it.
Yep, I love it. All right, everyone, thank you so much. Every week we'll be doing these interviews of people who are taking their ideas, their wildest ideas, and bringing them to life. Thanks for being here. We'll see you soon. Bye. Mwah.